Good morning.
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 Before you start recording, I'm gonna commit to a
My computer seems to be acting up a little bit. I don't know if, do I look like a Smurf to you?
yeah, your color's off. Like one of the ray gun, like in a CA cathode ray tube, one of the colors would be off.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with that. I got home yesterday and my son had the computer torn all apart and was putting in a new hard drive and a processor. And so I don't know if things are working right or not. Let's see. We got Seth, Anna, and Mark going up. Let me open up those right quick.
I just spilled water all over my damn presentation notes.
Well, that ain't good.
Well, I can reprint it real quick, thank God. Oh, crap. Let's not get it wet again.
All right. Seth, you ready this morning?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's find you and give you privileges.
Sweet.
Let's not spill water on that again.
All right. You got the show, buddy.
Sweet. All right, I'll start by sharing screen. All right. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yep.
All right, cool. So I did my project on hempcrete. I decided on hempcrete because, well, I work with concrete on a normal basis, and I just really wanted to see the comparative aspects of traditional concrete versus hempcrete. So it really took my interest, and that's why I ended up with hempcrete. So before we can really get into hempcrete itself, I want to start off by kind of describing what hemp is and the different parts of hemp. So of course it's a plant. Most of you may know about it. It's very popular right now, hemp oil, different things like that. But the three different parts of hemp are the bast, which is the fiber, which you can make clothes out of, different textiles, things like that. The hurd, which is what the hempcrete is actually made out of, part of. And then the seeds can be used for oils and different things like that. So what is the hempcrete actually made of? It's made of hurd, which is what I already told you is part of the hemp plant. It's kind of the stock part of it. It's kind of hard. It's made out of also a lime binder and water. And the ratio to that is 1 part hurd, 1.5 parts lime, and then the water is just added for consistency. So I'm going to go over a few of the uses of hempcrete. Here you can see a preformed wall and the hempcrete being placed in it. Here are blocks that were already precast that are being laid. And here is hempcrete under a floor. And here it is kind of used as like shotcrete, as like insulation. So some of the benefits of hempcrete are it's fire resistant, it's wind resistant, fungi resistant, has a high R value. It has 2.4 to 4.8 R value per inch. It's sound dampening, and it's also lightweight. And no CO2 off-gassing, which is very handy. Traditional concrete cracks, but hempcrete is crack resistant, so you don't have to worry about expansion joints like you would with traditional concrete. It's eco-friendly too. It is a very sustainable material to use. I'm going to go over a few cons of hempcrete as well. Some of the cons are not as many contractors know about it, have knowledge about it, or know how to use it. And another issue is the cost. Compared to traditional building, it's about 8 to 12% more money, more dollars than traditional building. Another con is it's hard to get a hold of in certain states because certain states just have hemp illegal and you just can't get a hold of it. And that can cause certain issues depending on what state you're in. Here in North Carolina, it's much easier than some other places, but it's also just hard to get a hold of compared to traditional concrete and traditional insulations. So what is the cost of the product? Traditional building is about $120 per square foot, where the hemp is about $180 per square foot. So would I use the product? Yes, I think the product is awesome. I would use it definitely for insulation. I would use it as much as I could and as much as I can get a hold of it. If I can afford it, I would definitely use it. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, questions?
Yeah, I was wondering about the differences in compression strength. Are they pretty comparable to standard concrete, or is there a difference?
As far as compression strength, it's much stronger than traditional concrete. Like in traditional concrete, you have to use rebar or wire, these sort of things in order to make sure that it doesn't crack, fall apart. Hempcrete isn't the same. It's much more sturdy compressively. So
Next. Any other questions? Don't know if you know it or not, but over at the college, we have some hempcrete there. It's over at the picnic shelter. We had a, and of course, those pictures didn't load up, did they? I don't think. Let me find it. You guys have probably seen it. It is in where we do the masonry. It's these walls back here. We had a workshop a little bit ago, and the one thing is, you know, when we done it, it's not being protected, so there's no plaster or anything on it, and it's kind of vulnerable right now. So when you put this up in this type of form, and what did you call that? Forming it, packing it in. What was that called?
I just called it like a preformed structure.
Okay. It needs to be protected. So there should be some sort of stucco on the outside, plaster on the inside type thing. And this is used, you know, in insulation type form. I wish I had some better pictures of it. It's just the one thing that you can see is these lines in here where the form has been moved up. They've packed it in and then moved the form up. And so it's really cool to watch that. A couple of students that were in the program actually got to help with that, and that was pretty cool. I'm kind of worried about it because we were down there the other day and or yesterday, and it is really starting to degrade a little bit. I'm going to try to load this picture up real quick and see if we can. It's going to take a little bit. So I'll come back and I'll talk about that. Of course, let me see if there's, yeah, the wall is Let me just try something right quick. I'm gonna mute myself for just a minute. Well, may take longer than I thought. I'm trying to get myself signed on on my phone. Yeah, now I can do it. Let's see if I can share screen on my phone. Not for sure I can. Yeah, there we go. This is new. There we go. See how it's starting to crack there a little bit? I'm getting kind of worried about that. It's going to fall down if we don't do something about it. And you know, you can see the cracks through there as well. And that's only because it's drying out, it's not being protected, and it's a bit of a problem, a little problematic there.
I was wondering what that was. Carlos and I just walked down to the Maple building for a moment. I looked over and I said, that's not block. What is that?
Yeah, that's the hempcrete that we did a couple of years ago. Any other questions for Seth?
Did you find that there were any pest issues?
Okay, Anna. You are
No,
now
no pest
co-host.
issues.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you.
Can you guys see it?
Yes.
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 You can? Okay, great. Good morning, guys. I hope you're doing well. So my presentation is on yurts.
Anna, we can't hear you, honey.
You can't hear me?
I can see you. Oh, wait a minute.
I can hear her.
You know what? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can hear.
I had my speakers off.
No worries.
I had my speakers off so it wouldn't create a bunch of flack when golly. Sorry.
No worries.
Do over.
Yeah, so my project is on the traditional yurt or ger. I'm not 1000% sure how to pronounce that, but I think it's close to that. So the yurt was developed by the nomadic tribes of the Mongolian people. They needed a form of housing that they could transport with them as they traveled. So they developed or created the ger. And they actually have a lot of interesting customs and spiritual values when it comes to traveling. For instance, they always cleaned their campground out of respect for the land, and they never left holes in the land, which is why, part of why the yurt is designed the way it is. Another important part of the GUR is that the door was originally made of felt, but over time they developed it to be made out of wood. And you'll see that all of the wood framing in the GUR is painted orange for safety, and the door itself actually symbolizes sustainability, which is interesting. So if we're talking about how the GUR was made, it's a little bit different than how the yurt is made today, the Western adaptation of it. So they started with 2 poles, and then they attached the compression ring. They usually tied it to the compression ring, and they had a lot of customs about how the compression ring was handled, how it was stored, who could touch it or not. And so once they had that up, they would put up the lattice walls, and they usually had 3 to 5 depending on the size of the yurt. So like a new family would maybe have 3 walls, a larger family would maybe have 5. And then they would use sometimes like hide or braided horsehair to tie the lattice walls together and to give it a little bit more support. And then you can actually see the framing a bit better this way. You can see that the rafters are attached to the lattice walls from the compression ring. And one difference is that they are actually tied to the cross in the lattice, whereas the Western design, it's sort of just laid on top of a very strong cord, and the lattice walls are attached to the door frame. That helps keep them sturdier. And then it's covered in felt and a white cotton cloth. The cotton cloth is more so for like water resistance and weather resistance, but that kind of insulation is actually incredibly helpful. It works really well. That's part of why the design is so good, because I mean, when we all think of Mongolia, we think that it probably gets really, really cold there. This is an artistic depiction of the inside of the GUR. You can see obviously that the wood stove or fire is right in the center so that the smoke can be released and no one suffocates. You can see that the furniture is sort of long, but not very wide to utilize space. They also had customs about where people sat in the yurt as well. Like the head of the household would always sit towards the back of the GUR. And also it was considered very rude to have conversations at the doorway. You were supposed to either have conversations inside or outside, but it was bad luck to have conversations in the doorway. I'm not sure why, but I do know that that is a custom they had. So now if we're talking about the Western adoption of the yurt, this happened in the 1960s by William, and then I definitely can't pronounce his last name. But this was largely the reason it got so popular was because environmentalism was really becoming popular in America at the time. And publications like the Whole Earth Catalog were becoming popular, and a lot of people had access to that. And the Whole Earth Catalog would include at times like building plans, essays, and graphics. And how a lot of people got access to information and how to build a yurt. So you would see communes where people wanted to live sustainably and they would build their own yurts because they had access to the information about it. And in 1978, actually, the first yurt company in America opened. Pacific Yurts is what it was called. I think they're still open today. They've been a very, very successful business. And the present day yurts are still popular because they're economical, sustainable, and transportable, which are all really important things when it comes to a lot of different people's lifestyles. So now we're going to talk about how the Western adaptation of the yurt is presently built. I included this picture because I thought this was like a really interesting design. Also a really pretty one. I like their walkway. So the first step in building a Western yurt is the foundation. It's a pretty simple foundation design. It's one that you could probably do yourself. Might be a little tedious though. You place footings in a circular shape, and then you can either level the footings, or you can level the beams. And I made sure to include like 3 different ways. You can see in each of the pictures that they did this in a different way, attaching the beams to the footers. But yeah, the basic idea of it is the same. You want to fasten the beams to the footers, and you want the footers to be in a circular shape to accommodate the yurt. Then you would move on to your platform and your flooring. From those beams, you would most likely add, if you're smart, insulation. That's going to help with pests. That's going to help with keeping your yurt cool or warm. And then some people stick OSB over the insulation. Some people just go ahead and put their tongue and groove flooring over that. But either way, the flooring you put on the platform is going to be your final flooring that you use for your home. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, and you can see it well on the next slide, but when you're doing your platform, you want to make sure that you have sort of like a final band around the platform so that your lattice can push up against it when you're forming your walls, so that your lattice doesn't just go off of the platform. Yeah, so once your platform and flooring is done, you're going to put up your lattice walls. I have seen videos where they just do one massive wall. It's very difficult to move, carry, set up because it's just so heavy. So I think that you should probably have at least a minimum of 2 and attach them to the front and back entrances. But yeah, you will be attaching your lattice walls to your door frames, which will be nailed into your flooring, because that is going to be your most stable source of just framing, really, because the lattice is strong, but I definitely wouldn't nail anything into it. And then after you have that, you're going to put a tension cord in between the top crosses of the lattice walls. This is an incredibly strong tension cord. It's usually made of steel. I've heard some people say that they use the same ones that they use for airplane hangars. And it makes sense because you are supporting your entire roof on that one cord, which you can see here. You see that they have the same design of having a compression ring and rafters that you attach that, but then they lay the rafters on top of that tension cord, which is why it's so important for it to be strong. And then here you can also see in the furthest right picture, that band right here that keeps the lattice at the bottom sort of in place. When it comes to insulation and covering, you're going to have a polyester insulation line over the rafters, your roof rafters. That's the first thing you're going to lay down. Then you're going to add a reflective insulation, which is going to be really great in the summer because it is going to get hot. Then you seal the top part of the roof with fiberglass reinforced aluminum tape. That's going to help with any potential water damage you might have. Then you put vinyl laminate on the roof and on the walls. And when you put out the walls around, or when you put the vinyl laminate around the walls, you're going to be tying it into the grommets that are at the top part that is laid onto the roof. And then some people choose to tie cords around everything else once it's put on, just for an extra layer of stability. It's kind of optional though. So you're probably also wondering about water, electricity, plumbing. Here on the right, you can see a really beautiful example of someone who has taken a yurt and then upgraded it to be, a permanent living situation. They've added windows, extra framing, drywall, and it looks beautiful. It looks very, very comfortable. When it comes to framing in the yurt, just like you would with your door framing, you're gonna frame mainly into the floor at first. That's going to provide stability, and then you can build whatever you like from there. A lot of people do lofts to utilize extra space. People have done some really beautiful designs with that. When it comes to plumbing, a lot of people do utilize a shared plumbing vent wall between the bathroom and the kitchen so that they can get the most bang for their buck when it comes to plumbing. People also consider a composting toilet because that way you can save on a black water system. It's also important to make sure that wherever your water lines are, that you keep it insulated and you have a consistent heat source, especially in the winter. You don't want that to freeze. When it comes to electrical, I have seen yurts where they just did open framing and you can, the wiring is covered, but you can still see that it's done. You can mount outlets and switches to snow legs, hard openings, or directly to the floor. I personally would have a hard time just having that out in the open. I would worry about it getting messed up, and also doesn't look great. So I would probably opt for like some drywall by that point if we're doing the framing already. And this is a picture of a yurt that a couple did in Portland. It's very modern. You can see that it has plumbing, electrical. The design is very different. But you can see that they use a plumbing wall because the sink and their kitchen is on one side, and then inside of that square, that's where their bathroom is. Here's another picture of one. This is pretty minimal. I mean, you basically just have a fridge, oven, bathroom. I think they have a shared sink. I spot like a little heating system. They have a fan, but it looks nice. I mean, I'm sure they make a ton of money off of it for Airbnb, and I definitely wouldn't mind staying there. So the budget for yurts is high is like 44,000, average is 27,000, and low is about 11,000. But if you think about it as a fully functioning home build, it's not crazy expensive. I mean, it's pretty economical. It also depends on how you build, how much control over it you have. I mean, if I were doing it, I would buy the yurt kit used, build my own frame, and then outsource maybe like the plumbing and electrical. And you could definitely save some money that way. If you're looking at resale value, here's actually an example that I found in Asheville. This woman is selling a 12-foot wide yurt for $2,500. She originally bought it for $5,000. It's 5 years old, so that's not a great depreciation rate. I mean, it's degraded. The price is degraded pretty rapidly. But if you are the one purchasing a yurt, I think this would be a great way to go. I mean, you're paying about half of what she paid, and the materials are still fine. Also, if anyone wants a yurt in Nashville, there's one for sale. So I would say the pros of it is, I think it is a great starter home. Like if you were a person, couple, or family that has bought some land and cannot afford to do a stick-built home, a yurt would be a great option because it is comfortable, it is spacious, it is transportable if you want to move it to a rental space after you're done with it. Yeah, so I think it has a lot of great qualities, and it is, you know, the basis of what made it so popular in the first place. It's, you know, easy to assemble, disassemble, transport, and it's not that expensive. Cons, you know, with all alternative housing, it might not be the right option for everyone. If you're looking at heating and cooling, it's not going to be the same as a stick-built home with the same kind of foundation. Depending on where you are, just like every alternative housing, you know, permitting could be an absolute nightmare. It could be fine. Really just depends on where you are. I personally would worry about pests. I would worry about insulation issues, because I mean, the more connected you are with nature and where you are living, the more connected you are with flies, mice, etc. And you know, if you're living off grid, that's also going to pose its own problems, just with any sort of structure that's off grid. Why would I build this? I would build this because it's affordable, comfortable, fairly easily assembled compared to some other things, and it provides extra space or passive income if you wanted to use it as a rental to make some more money, or Airbnb, or even a guest house for when people come visit you. And there are my sources. There is a really cool documentary that I watched about the Mongolian berg, I think, yurt, and it's really interesting. So if anyone wants the link to that, feel free to ask me, because it's very cool.
Very nice. Thank you. Questions?
I was surprised by the larger ones you showed there that I didn't realize they got so fancy.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really beautiful ones. I saw one in Washington that they spent 35 grand on, and it was huge, and they actually did an addition to it as well. So they had like a 2,000 square foot home that they spent like 35 grand on.
That's still cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing I was thinking about when you were talking affordability. When my folks built this house that I live in 1966, they paid a whole whopping $27,000 for it. And of course, I've added on to it, and it is now estimated by the Burke County tax collector is $280,000. So, you know, for you guys that are young trying to get into a house nowadays, things are quite different. Matter of fact, my first home, which was only 900 square feet, when we sold it, it was sold for $24,000. But you know, it's probably worth 70 to 100 now, and it's, you know, a tiny, tiny house. On the comical side, does anybody else think that that looks like a Pokeball in the middle of that thing?
I can't see it. Are you able to zoom? Oh,
Yes,
I see what it-
definitely.
I see it now. It's a person's head, but man,
oh,
she was showing it. I thought, why is there a Pokeball right in the middle of this thing?
at first.
Glad I wasn't the only one. Glad I wasn't the only one. So, you know, at some point, when do we go from Yurt to Deltec? And for those of you that are not familiar with Deltec,
I was thinking the very same thing.
When you start prefabbing panels in an octagon.
yeah. So this is a Deltec home, and we have a Deltec home in our neighborhood, you know, but does that not look very much similar to, you know, it's got a compression ring. Of course, we don't have a wire around the outside of it, but it's pretty cool. So one of my colleagues at Western Piedmont Community College, when I was there, this was his house and he lived in Spruce Pine, which is in the high country of North Carolina. It's pretty daggum cold. The living room was a yurt. This was the kid's bedroom. This was him and his wife's bedroom. And so they had several different portions of the house that were, you know, you had to go outside. So one thing to be thinking about when you're talking about a yurt is definitely a change in your lifestyle. So he is now a senior professor at App State University with the sustainable technology program there. And this is his new house. And I know we kind of talked about greenhouse. So on the south side of his house, and I actually designed this house, and the outside of his house has a greenhouse on it. And so this helps keep his house warm in the wintertime. And but he does have moisture issues as well. I also did a quick search for Airbnb, and look at there, Asheville, North Carolina, and you can rent this Airbnb, which looks really nice in Asheville. Biggest thing is that big old wood stove right there. I think I'm finding out with this bus as well that wood stove is a good thing to have because it eliminates a lot of moisture. And so, you know, when you're talking about a yurt, you're talking about fabric stuff in here. And so you're going to have to deal with some moisture condensation in the wintertime, especially if you got some breathing humans in here that's going to breathe off moisture. It's not always, well, with any house, you're going to have to be dealing with moisture. So my concern is the insulation. So when I was asking Chip about his, you see that big old wood stove in there. Again, it's just a different lifestyle. You're gonna, you might be accustomed to wearing a turtleneck sweater all day long and all night when you're working, and so it's, big old socks and mucklucks inside the house to keep you warm. So it's definitely not for everybody, for sure. Oh, I know one other thing. This is Yellowstone National Park. If you've ever been to Yellowstone, Yellowstone pretty much shuts down in the wintertime because they get so much snow. And in the wintertime, they'll pop these yurts up for the staff to live in. So there's not, you go to Bozeman, and the next closest big town, I guess, would be Idaho Falls. There's not a great deal of larger cities around there. So housing has been problematic. These two actually sit right beside of Old Faithful. And there may be a commune living. There may be probably, a dozen people living in here, but I thought it was pretty cool when I was visiting that, they set these things up in the spring, use them all summer long, no air conditioning. Generally, it doesn't get too terribly hot there. And when it does, it's a dry heat. And then they take them down in the fall, approaching winter, it's about time to take it down at this point. So the government uses them quite extensively in some of the park systems, and also Glacier National Park. I've seen a couple in Glacier National Park as well.
What's that to the left of the yurt? The left yurt, is that part of the fence or?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's a solar panel for something, or I don't rightly know right offhand, but it looks to be a little solar cell for maybe a ventilator or something inside. Last minute questions.
To me, it kind of looks like something that you could convert one of those park pavilions or whatever, you know what I'm talking about? You know, if it's possible to do that, like enclose one of those and make it something
like that. Like a picnic shelter?
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, like the octagonal.
Oh yeah.
Some parks have.
Gazebo?
Shaped the same.
Gazebo, yeah.
Can't think of the word.
That's what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That might be a little too small, way too small, but.
Well, you can get them in bigger sizes, I promise you.
Sure, a much bigger one, you could probably.
Well, that one that she was talking about in Asheville that was for sale, 12 foot. What do you do with a 12-foot yurt?
Swing cats?
What?
Swing some cats?
Swing some cats. I'm in the wrong one here. Wait a minute. Yurt. No, yurt. There. But, if you did something like Chip did, and, this could be the kid's bedroom, and then you could buy another one, and that could be your, the master bedroom, and so forth, and then connect them all by tunnels and stuff. I've seen that as well. It's a yurt seems to be like a glorified tent, and some people still set these things up and live in them on a dirt floor. So I don't know that they do it too much around here because of the amount of rain that we have, but Southwest, I can see this happening for sure. I noticed that some of these models have this clear dome. Is that kind of standard with a prepackaged deal, Anna?
Yeah, a lot of them come with it. I mean, I think people like them because it's basically almost like a skylight. If I were to have a wood stove right in the center of it. Obviously, that wouldn't be the best choice. It just depends. I mean, some people put a wood stove in the center, some people put a wood stove on the side. Some people don't have a wood stove, but it is part of the kits that I've seen, because it's basically like a skylight.
Well, I guess my dog is I'm gonna put her out. Come on, let's go get her. Go get her. Go get her. Go find that dog. Go find that dog. Love it. Love it. She's still going crazy in there. So, again, insulation, man. Insulation seems like it would be kind of a hard thing there. What kind of R values are we talking about? Do you know?
I'd have to do some more research to get the actual R values of it, but my friend did something similar to your friend. She sort of had like bedrooms, and then they had a yurt as their kitchen, and it was in the dead middle of the summer in the rain. It was super hot and raining, and I was in there, and like it was definitely the most comfortable space on that land. So I'm not sure the exact R value, but I do know it's at least enough to be comfortable. It's not going to be the same as a house, but yeah.
Right. Let's see what this company says about insulation.
Using wool, the wool outperforms any synthetic materials we have. So yeah, if you look at the traditional wool insulation, you got a lot of yaks that you can.
So yeah, wool insulation seems to be a very big topic in the bus thing too. And so my question is, one person got on there and they're telling about how great wool is and this, that, and other thing. And then they say, well, it resists insects. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, why do I have my uniform for Last of the Mohicans made out of wool? Why do I have to put mothballs in there to keep the moths from eating it if it's bug resistant? Am I missing something?
It might have more to do with the fact that the wool is anhydrous. It's not going to hold water, and the water's what attracts the pests.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, but I just wonder if we get do we need to put mothballs in the walls with this stuff?
How much moisture are you anticipating in your closet?
None, hopefully. But that's, that seems to be a topic anyway. Notice that they are using reflective material, and that was something that Anna brought up as well, that, where was it? I seen it, reflective insulation. All right, so that is a huge thing. And, when you think about reflective insulation, it doesn't, reflective, what is reflective? Your tinfoil hat that you wear, when you watch the news or, listen to political debates and stuff, that stuff is that's all you need. Reflective insulation is basically something that's going to take care of radiation. So to bounce that radiation back off, when you're putting in all of this other stuff, fiberglass and stuff like that, you're trying to deal with convection. And then when you put the seal down or use the seal around the tops of your double top plates, then you're eliminating conduction. But think about it. How many houses actually have a reflective material somewhere on the roof somewhere, unless they've got a white or a what is it called, metal that goes on the roof, galvalume or aluminum, that's not going to be reflective. Matter of fact, a friend of mine, he's building a house right now and he's using metal, but it's black. And I'm like, ugh. So, is that reflective? I doubt it. But that's something that we just never have addressed before, is the reflective insulation, and we've not dealt with radiation in our houses. This cord, you said that it's like super strong, and I can imagine it would have to be to be able to hold this structure together. It looks like it would be pretty massive. These newer type like this, like you were talking about those kits, even, you know, this, how easy would it be to take these down and put them back up? Did you come up with anything, Anna?
I mean, from what I've seen, the longest part about making yurts is the platform, because most of the people who are setting up yurts don't have a ton of building experience. So they have trouble with the foundation and the platform and getting that together. It seems like putting up the basics of the yurt, if you just have like a couple and their friend comes to help, takes about a week to 2 weeks, depending on how quickly they are working, how much help they have. So I would imagine disassembling it, depending on how many utilities you have installed in there, would also take about a week to 2 weeks, depending on what you're thinking of, you know. And one of the major things that makes this take longer is that, unlike the gear, there aren't two poles in the center to hold up that ring. You have to get up on a ladder and attach it, and that's hard.
Yeah. Well, I noticed that, you know, with these two poles, they're not using that wire. So the support for the roof is on basically on these two poles. So the gear seems to be more like a glorified tent, where, you know, this modern day is, you know, it's not something that we could just take down and go to the next campsite with, obviously.
Yeah, it would take a minute. It would at least probably take like 2 weeks to a couple months.
Yeah. Definitely very interesting, for sure. Absolutely. Other questions? Comments?
Just one little comment. You mentioned the Whole Earth catalog, and if any of you have a chance to take a look at it, it's a sweet little piece of history from a pre-internet age.
It really is super cool.
If any of you have a chance to check out the Whole Earth catalog, that's how people found out about stuff before there was an internet to go search around on things. And the items in that catalog are pretty incredible, even for how dated some of it is.
Yeah, it's really cool. I know that the last Whole Earth catalog also included like a blueprint for a sustainable urban house that basically was like a mini homestead. It turned out to not work long term, but there was just so many cool ideas and essays and building plans in it. Like, it really is super cool.
Yeah, you've got the last Whole Earth catalog there, and that was from the late 70s, but they did put out a Millennium Earth Whole Earth catalog recently, about 15 years.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's still going. I've got 3 of them.
Is this kind of like Foxfire books?
Actually, no, it's instead of being more explanations of, you know, traditional crafts and things like Foxfire is, it's more like a Sears catalog for environmentalism.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Oh, I didn't know there was a free online copy. That's cool.
And that bottom right-hand corner right there is one of the best books ever written by Gurney Norman. It's called Divine Rights Trip, and they published it on the bottom corner of every page so that you'd flip through the whole catalog to read the book.
Where are you seeing this now?
That bottom right corner there, that enclosed corner, yeah,
Yes.
that's a novel written by an author named Gurney Norman. And they put it in the book so you'd read the novel and flip through every page of the catalog.
Huh, that's pretty interesting.
Fantastic book. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. Yeah, I see it. I had a book growing up called what the heck it was. Something I don't remember what the name of it was, but it was basically something similar to this. And it was written like in the 1800s for how to build a shelter or how to build. It was basically something, a survival book for boys is what it was called. And it was very cool. And I used to go out in the woods and do all this kind of stuff. But this is pretty daggum cool here. I like it. I've never seen this.
You'd love it, Eric.
I would. I already am. Yeah, for sure. And you say there's a millennial version?
The New Millennium or something like that. The Millennium Whole Earth Catalog. Instead, don't put in the last, put in the Millennium Whole Earth Catalog.
Oh.
That'll be the new one.
What did you say?
The Millennium Whole Earth Catalog, I think.
Now you want me to spell
Yeah.
that.
Millenium. There you go. So that's the most recent one.
Okay. Cool. I'll leave this up, and that's pretty cool. So yeah, if anybody wants this, go to the Internet Archive, and you can flip through this book, and it looks very cool. This reminds me of some of my old woodworking books. I've got a huge collection of 17th and 18th century woodworking books, and this is pretty much, they had you can't exactly zoom too well, huh? Oh yeah, if I'd have used the zoom that was on the thing there, I could. May take a little bit. Anyway, so yeah, take a look at that. That's pretty cool for sure. Yeah, yeah. So they're all basically hand-drawn drawings it's in some of these books, and it's really, really cool. And a lot of this
work there is really incredible. I highly recommend all of that too.
What is it?
Eric Sloan, the author who did the Museum of Early American Tools. He also did Barnes, and
yeah,
all of his books are great. His illustrations are awesome.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really sad to think that this is really a dying art for sure. If you guys ever get a chance, if you're on TikTok, look up Old Salem, and they do quite a few nice little snippets that talk about how living and not just woodworking, but cooking and cleaning and washing clothes and all that stuff that is, it's a dying art. So it's really cool to watch that stuff. Definitely stay in touch with your history.
I will say there's also one more cool book. It's from the 50s, and it's called How to Build a House for $350. I recommend you check it out. It's pretty cool.
I can get my fingers to work.
I'm not sure if that's the exact title, but if you can't find it, I'll find it and send it to you.
How to Build a House Under 400K, maybe? Or was it $300?
No, it was like $350. It was cheap.
And you say it's a book?
Yeah. If you can't find it, I'll do a deep dive on the internet and send it to you.
Okay, yeah, do that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, very nice. All right, Mr. Timothy, are you ready?
I guess so. We'll see how well I get through.
Yes, so.
Yes, so. I don't have the memory y'all do, so I'm gonna have to read some of this from my notes. I'm sorry. There's a lot of text here.
All righty, you ready to go?
Share screen. Minimize this. And, okay, wait a minute. Oh, crap. There we go. All right, I chose mine on underground dwellings. And sorry for the transition. I worked in the movie theater for almost 21 years, so I chose that curtain transition. Got the history, the pros and the cons. There's going to be some slight overlap between Mark and Samantha with the earth sheltered and earth ships. One thing that I did that might be a little different in the beginning is the history. You got what you have called south terrains, comes from the French word south terrains. As you can see in the images, this is circa 800 BCE. They were discovered with stone slabs and some timber. It's theorized. They're not sure of the true purpose, but it's theorized that they were arms storage during their wars. The province of Munster, these caves were found there. And I briefly looked up the Northman Doth and Noth. Let's see, what did I put here? Oh, this is the Boyne Valley in Ireland. Like I said previously, they theorized that this is where they stored arms at during the wars back there. Oh, excuse me, turn the heat off. All right, Scotland's another prominent area where caves were found, earth houses. The term fogus was used to define these ancient caves. Several hundred have been discovered. And primary northern and eastern Scotland, the subterranean depths are different though in those areas. They're not consistent. And outside of Britain, you can find these caves or underground structures in Europe, China, Korea, and North America, and Scandinavia, which is where they're very prominent. These are the pros, and some of these are more relevant to the ancient structures and some are relative to the modern. Obviously, our ancestors wanted protection from the elements. Since they didn't have modern heating and cooling methods, they could maintain a consistent temperature and privacy and safety from warring tribes or creatures of the night. Now, a couple of these pros and cons will be related to the modern era. You got green space and excellent insulation provided by the living roof and low maintenance. The cons, there's a lot more. Obviously, there's poor ventilation and not good air quality, and obviously in the old structures. Not much natural light. Let's see, water leaks, even back then, were a prominent disadvantage. Humidity would be high. Now, in the modern era, you got the issue of radon, which is very serious. Obviously, if you use this type of construction, you'd have to have a radon detector system. The problem is finding professionals with this particular type of construction. It's more and more common nowadays, but still people have to know how to excavate. The concrete and waterproofing systems are not eco-friendly. You got to worry about local building codes as you do with the earth ships and the earth shelters. You got to check your zoning issues before you even consider to build in an area. And one of the biggest things is once this is designed and built, you can't expand. And because it's so very unique, resale might be very difficult unless you can find someone with a common ideology. All right, going back to some of the history, you got two main types, which they're almost synonymous. I don't see how they actually distinguish, as you'll see in some of the images. You got your dugouts. Basically, our nation was formed from immigrants coming all over the world, But the main two that facilitated the dugouts and pit houses and underground houses, our ancestors were the Norwegians and Swedes. They had already perfected the methods in their own lands. Because I mentioned earlier, they wanted to get out of the elements and away from their enemies and creatures. So they brought their expertise over here and kept on building as they did in their homeland. As you can see here, this is an image of a dugout, and pit houses were basically the same. I had to use the same images, but the Swedes were the most prominent, as I mentioned earlier, to come over here and construct what you can see. They dig it out and use timbers. And the disadvantage of this method was the roofing. If you didn't have a good mesh, a good rain would wash it away. This is kind of what it looked on the outside. Oh yeah. One of the things that took place in 1860s in the United States, the Homestead Act was passed, which allowed migrating farmers to settle on a piece of land and farm it for several years, and then they were allowed to own it. Problem is, though, they were not engineers, so they could build a pretty good structure, but they were just farmers. So usually the sod roofs could cave in from rain or other elements. So sometimes they had to rebuild frequently. The good thing about these structures, they're self-sufficient and very energy efficient. As you can see here, that's a typical dugout on the left, and they're similar to what we can term earth burned. You can see the cow standing on the roof. I'm not sure when this was taken. It looks like a long time ago. Pit houses is another style, but like I said, looking at the images, they're very similar. Now, the thing about the pit houses, they're older, supposedly. They go back 25,000 years ago in Europe, but they have been discovered in Utah as soon as a century ago, but they're about 5,000 years old. And our ancestors, or American Indian ancestors, and ancient Pueblo, the Fremont, and Alcaic were known to have constructed these. And I had to use the same images because they're very similar. I didn't see any real difference between the two when I was researching this. So I used the same images over. And, some were obviously better constructed than others. In areas where you might have had stone, you could have earth burned it. But like the one on the left, that probably was not very stable unless they had a heavy thatch to reinforce the roof. So it would have taken a lot of tree foliage to do that with. Now, I was surprised to find this. This is what was termed a long time ago as a hope house. The term implies that they would build just basically a basement, put a roof on it. And if they saved enough pennies, they could eventually build another level. Hence the term hope house. They hope had enough funds in the future to expand. Otherwise, they basically just lived in a basement their whole lives with a roof on it. This one is no longer in existence. So this photo is probably quite old. All right, this is a concept design that I found, but I was not able to find any real houses built in this manner. So I'm kind of curious about that. This is called the umbrella house, and you can see the airflow tubes. And the next thing, you see how the airflow changes to the various seasons. This is the basic construction. You got polyethylene insulation and also polystyrene sheets. I'm gonna have to read this part because I can't remember the technical stuff. The polyethylene was synthesized by scientists in 1933 and reacted to ethylene with benzohyde under extreme heat and pressure. Now, polystyrene, on the other hand, is a polymer that's created from a monomer styrene, which is a liquid hydrogen carbon derived from petroleum. Like I said, I haven't found any actual photos of houses constructed in this matter, but it appears to be a valid design. Here you can see the various temperatures. And when I found this, I was surprised because I'd heard most of my life that typically temperatures below grade usually range around 45, 50, 55. But in this chart, it shows varying temperatures. And this has to do with obviously different climates around the country. So it probably could vary depending on where you're situated. But I've always been told it was, or heard that it was around 50 degrees constant. So I have to do a little more research on that, why that varies so much. I think Mark had this in his slideshow. This is a typical template of a cross-section view of a very simplistic underground house. And there's always variations, but this just gives you a general idea of what it might look like if you just cut a slice through. And of course, there's multiple variations of this same thing. Now, this is something near and dear to my own heart. When I found this, I'm like, this brings back memories. In 1978, when I went to my college back home for the first time, my then instructor told us to choose a floor plan design to use for the year. Well, I remember an old movie, Eric might remember, the rest of you are too young. It's called The Andromeda Strain in 1971. It's about a 5-level underground biohazard facility, and it was circular. And that, between that and Star Trek, inspired me to submit a 3-level circular underground design. Well, he poo-pooed it. He didn't like it. He said that's unpractical and no one would ever do anything like that. So I had to choose something else. I ended up doing an L-shaped plan. Well, I started subscribing to Popular Science in 1978. And I was still in other programs, even in 81. And I think it was the July issue of Popular Science. On the cover was not only the design, but the completed construction of a 3-level circular underground house, I think in Texas. Imagine how I felt. I took that magazine into school the next day and flopped it on my instructor's desk. And I said, you see there, this guy had the same idea about the same time I did, and you kept me from my dreaming. I'll never forget that. I still get upset every time I talk about it, but you know, I could have had a different future had he not let me do that. Here you see images of prefab. They're not as common yet, but I think in the near future, they will become more common because everything's turning to prefab. It's much more efficient to build it in a factory environment and then set it in place, although you're going to have more up cost. And the image on the right is a typical underground structure, obviously all concrete with a sod roof, but this one has a lot of daylight exposure. There's 3 types of the earth shelter, which kind of blended over into the underground. This is the in-hill, which I don't consider this the underground style at all. You can see it is actually all above ground. It's okay. We go next. Yeah. All right. Now this is the berm that was mentioned before. The difference here is bermed can be either have a sod roof or an open roof. And in many instances, you'll see solar panels as a energy substitution or to help with it. Okay. Now this is the true earth sheltered home because it should be below grade, at least on 3 walls to be determined underground. All right, the hidden cost are the excavation, usually 10 to 25% higher because of the renting of all the equipment, not only for excavation, which is extremely expensive, but even if it's not prefab, you more than likely have I-beams, steel I-beams that have to be lifted into place. So crane costs have to be considered as well. So the upfront costs are greater, but in the long run, due to low maintenance, it should even out. And here's some examples of kind of like earth bermed underground houses into hills. And when I first saw this, I thought of the Hobbits, the Lord of the Rings, and they actually do exist. I didn't get any images for the slideshow, but I've seen Hobbit houses that people actually live in. I think they were on Facebook when I saw them the first time. These are more modern, massive underground dwellings. And you can see they're quite open. One of the cons is supposedly limited sunlight, but that was our ancestors. The more modern ones, exposure is not an issue. And not only can you do what is seen on the left, you can have multiple skylights as you see on the right. And that's very common. The only drawback, you really have to make sure it's sealed well, or you're going to have water issues. And some more images. I mean, these things vary in size and shape and design. They're all over different parts of the country. And they can be quite fancy, as you can see. There's no limit to the design, only your own imagination. Other things to consider is the climate in which you choose to build. You got to be careful about extreme temperature swings and the humidity factor, because it's basically a basement with dirt on top, and all basements are going to have high humidity. Hence, you probably need dehumidifiers. Or what I was thinking of is probably just have a fire pit, fireplace, or wood stove to heat it, as well as traditional heating, because that would eliminate a lot of the moisture. You got to consider any water nearby or on your property. You have to be careful and make sure you know which way the water is flowing before you even consider it, because if it's going to flow anywhere near the construction of the house, you're going to have to spend money to divert it and or water seal your house. Otherwise, you're going to have issues you cannot fix. So the topography and the type of soil is very important. You basically want gravel or sandy soil. Clay is not preferred because it holds a lot of moisture. And let's see. And that's it. Well, that didn't flow too bad, I guess. Eric, you're muted.
Sorry,
There you go.
keep doing that. Well, I thought I opened it. There it is. I was trying to do a search of that one darn archaeological site, and I think this might be it. And it falls right in these type of underground dwellings where they had stacked rock, had some wood beams, some rock beams across through there, and then basically peat moss earth, peat moss earth, peat moss earth across through there to end up making their dwelling. And for some reason, I cannot find any information on this at all. And like you, when I was in architectural school, this was what I had studied, and I, for the life of me, cannot find it anyway. So I will find it eventually.
It's a fascinating history. That's why I chose to put all that in there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you think underground, I mean, we first as humans, we probably tried to, we were cavemen or so, so we're told. Not exactly in every climate did they, could you build a cave? But basic, the Mesa Verde, is a cool, cave dwelling. So when you're thinking about modern day houses, so we live in Western North Carolina. We dig, and most of the time here we have basements, or at least I don't know about most of the time, but there's a lot of daggum houses that have basements. And the biggest issue with every basement is water leakage. If it's not done properly, if it's not drainage has not been put in, this, that, and other thing, then you're definitely going to have a problem. So, why don't we have these hope houses anymore? Any thoughts on that?
Uh, you mean with the basement and the one level structure?
Yeah, I mean, why don't we have a basement with a roof on it, basically? Basements,
Use-
go ahead.
I said condensation problems.
Well, but we've got better technology today than they did when these hope houses were built.
True.
You know, we can put French drains all the way around it, at surface level and at floor level, get that water out of there, and you know, we're underground. I don't know, when it just seems to me that, you know, let's just say this, I can keep my basement at a better constant temperature than I can the first floor any day of the week, all year round.
True.
Hands down. Tell me about these earth tubes here, buddy.
I think that has more to do with the airflow to eliminate, you know, the humidity and the moisture. Like I said, I couldn't find a lot on this. I found these images, but couldn't find much information. I can go digging some more, but this looks like a very well thought out design. But like I said, I never found any images of an actual structure like this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to require some more research.
Yeah, it's definitely having to get that air in there, and, you know, just using stacked effect. My concern is with this going back down under the earth rather than popping out up above, then you're going to have some sort of mechanical means to actually make this work. It couldn't work passively. Now we could, you know, we could definitely go in here and put us a little waterproof top.
I don't know why they didn't do it that way.
That way we're going to have, you know, it's going to work passively for sure.
Kind of like a chimney flue to draw the
Yeah.
air.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought this was strange when I first came across it. I'm like, well, damn, how's that supposed to work?
Now this here, this comparison, there's no way in the world this comparison is in the same region. It seems to me like, you know, this comparison is North Carolina, Western North Carolina, and this comparison is Canada.
Yep.
You're not going to have quite so deep changes unless this is inches. If it's feet, it's wrong. But if it's inches, I could understand it.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think of that. I see the demarcation lines now, so I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, if it's inches, you know, 20 inches down, depending again where you're at, you know, the frost line is 48 inches in Rochester, New York, and it's 12 inches here in Burke County. It's 18 inches in Boone, and so, you know, it is going to vary. But after you get, you know, if we get 20 feet, unless we're in the Antarctic or the Arctic Circle, if we get to 20 feet, I mean, it's just going to be froze for a long time. But where we have a mixed climate, it's not going to vary that far down.
Yeah, when I saw that, I was kind of like, well, I don't know where they came up with this. I mean, it looks kind of old based on the cartoon effect. Like maybe this must have been previous notions before they actually scientifically validated it.
Yeah. I see here on this drawing, they're talking about the tubes as well. We got the lower tube entering the house, and then the upper tube exiting the house. But again, if it drops down to an equal size, then we can't do it passively. We have to keep that higher.
You'd have to have fans in the tubes, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, hey, I touched upon that in my geothermal presentation. Like once you're a certain depth down the ground, usually the temperature stays like 50 degrees or so.
Yeah.
That's where they get that energy from. So the temperature down there stays constant.
But now where, you know, the further you get towards the equator, the deeper that 50-degree mark is going to be. And, or no, I take it. Well, yeah. So let's say if we take the equator and the Arctic Circle, those you're going to have to be, you know, you might be 20 foot deep before you get to 50 degrees. because in the tropics, the sun's hitting that all the time. And, so it's going to be hotter further down. And then in the Arctic Circle, or in the Arctic circles, Arctic poles, then, it's going to be frozen that far down. But, in Western North Carolina, it's going to vary, and it's not going to change quite so much. Oh, heat sinks. So you think about Interstate 40. Think about Walmart parking lot. What color is that asphalt? Black. The temperature underneath that ground in the summertime or in the wintertime is going to be very much more higher temperatures than the surrounding areas. And so it's heat sink is a big thing to have to deal with. When I was growing up, and bless your heart, Timothy, I know you think you and I are about the same age, but I think you got a couple more years on me, because I don't even remember
6 years.
I don't even
I'm
remember
6 years old.
1971. I was born in 1966, but I don't, I
I was
wasn't
already
born.
watching Star Trek by then.
So, I remember when all of the interstates were concrete.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
When it snowed, by God, it would immediately settle on that concrete and start piling up. Whereas today, it can snow and snow and snow and snow and snow, and it might start laying on the roads because the roads are so hot because of that heat sink, because it's absorbing. I have seen where some of these abandoned silos are being sold to privateers, and they're building houses in these darn things.
I have seen those myself.
So it's pretty cool to think that, it's kind of scary at the same time. They have buildings in China that are so large and so tall that and have every possible amenity that a person could ever need inside the building, such as schools, doctor's offices, dentist office, movie theaters, everything. And there have been reports of some humans have never touched Earth. They have been in this building their entire lives, and they've never been outside and actually touched ground, Earth. So think about, if push comes to shove, and we're in a, if we have this nuclear war thing going on that, was big back in the 60s during the Cold War, underground houses, we might have to go into hibernation and live in these underground houses till radiation levels drop so that we can revisit the Earth. But then, you're thinking you're going to have to reuse this air in here. And so you're probably going to have hydroponic systems in here, aquaponic systems in here, so that you can totally cut yourself off from the outside world. And that's a scary thing. But now, here we just landed on Mars with a new rover, and so we're starting to, think about colonization. Why in the hell, why don't we just start taking better care of our own planet? I don't know. But, if we can build a house on Mars, why couldn't we build a house in the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean? Maybe because of pressure. I don't know. Any number of things could be going on there. So these prefab units that we're thinking about here. So these are made of plastics, and we're told that you throw plastic away and it takes 800 years to degrade. So does that mean that if we cover all this plastic up and it doesn't get any UV light, then this stuff's going to last 800 years? That's a good question. Something to think about there.
One thing I thought of after the fact was I keep up with a lot of modern building constructions, and you have those pre-cast like styrofoam forms that they form the basement walls in, and they got the plastic snaps to hold it all together, and then you put the rebar in. I mean, basically, that can be, I mean, that's for most base houses with basements, but when I was listening to Mark and Samantha, I was thinking about all that I'd studied over the years that, I mean, that's the modern wave now, to use these forms that you take away, and you have a solid concrete wall, with rebar. And I mean, they've come, I mean, a child could put it, it's like Lego, you put it together, and then they've got the formula for the cement damn well perfected. And I mean, the trucks are constantly rolling. I watched many videos on this. I mean, that's the way to go, not only for basements, but, even for above grade. And I'm surprised you don't see that much more of it. But I mean, if you're going to do an underground house, this would be the way to do it, I think, rather than having prefab, which would be very expensive.
Another type of prefab is superior wall systems, which is, they're made in a pristine environment, concrete. It's not going to have, probably not going to have the insulation properties that there it is. This is insulated concrete form, and this insulation stays there. So it's.
Oh, you don't take it away?
Nope, it stays there.
Okay.
Yep, it is poured, and then you stucco the outside. Well, you waterproof the outside, stucco it, and then you can, on the inside, you can go and put drywall or whatever you want there. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Now is that a styrofoam composite, or what is that?
You can get it in this is expanded polystyrene, this is extruded polystyrene, and you can get both of those. Basically, like you said, they come in a block form like Legos. Has plastic little pieces in it that keep them together. And then you basically just go and fill it full of rebar in both directions. So you have to make basically a mat, a mesh inside the wall, and then you pour it with concrete. The biggest problem is how much lift you can pour. And what I mean by lift is, so we can only pour a certain feet all the way around it, let it cure, and then come back and keep going around. We can't just pour the whole thing full to the top.
I think it's either 2 or 4 feet, because I've watched videos on this. So
it's manufacturer specific. So different manufacturers set their own rate of pour limits. So for sure. But yeah, these two systems right here would be great to work underground. This system here, of course, is a cast in place system. So you got to build the walls, put the rebar in, and then pour your concrete. This system is a precast, which means that you can set this, you can have these entire walls set in, less than a day. But then, what are you going to do for your roof? By putting it, by making it underground, you're going to definitely have to go in and start doing some reinforced beams and stuff in here, maybe lightweight concrete roof, or you could do like that hoop house and just come, a foot or so up out of the ground and start putting your roof there and be done with it.
Are those metal studs in there?
They are.
Okay. I hadn't seen that style before. The other one I'm familiar with. This is new to me.
Yep.
And these are called superior walls. I got to look.
Superior wall. Mm-hmm.
The construction industry is wide open right now. I mean,
once we're done, I'll be doing a couple extra little. We'll talk about some other traditional builds and stuff, and I'll talk a little bit more about the superior walls and the ICFs and so forth. Any other questions for Mr. Timothy? Any other comments?
Oh, now I can sleep tonight.
All right. Okay. Well, we're going to make up a little time again, so we're finished early. Thank you very much. We will get back together on Monday, and let's see.
Ben and Brian. That's all we got left.
Yeah, it should be just 2. Yep. Ben Goddard and Brian. So Neither one of them are with us today. Okay. All right, guys. So see you back here on Monday, same bat channel, same bat time.
Read my mind. I was thinking that.
Have a good one, guys.
All right, later,
Take care.
Thank you.
later.